ممنون. با درود فراوان به شرکت کنندگان، برنامه ماه می 2023 AIAP Association of Iranian American Professional یا انجمن متخصصین ایرانیان سندیاگو را آغاز می کنیم. من فریبا زاکری هستم و افتخار عضویت در هیئت مدیره AIAP را دارم. با کمال خوشنودی به حضور شما میرسانم که ما در این برنامه از دو سخنران ارزشمند دعوت کردیم که با شرکت و ارائه سخنرانی خود به غنیسازی این گروه گرد همایی کمک ویژه داشته باشند. همچنین ما چندین خبر ارزنده و افتخارآور برای شما عزیزان تهیه کرده ایم که چند لحظه دیگر به حضور شما میرسانم. قبل از شروع برنامه چند نکته اساسی که برای این جلسه ضرورت دارد رو میخواستم با شما در میان بگذارم. 1. لطفاً تلفن‌های خودتون رو روی سایلنس بگذارین که مایه دیستربنس سخنران‌ها و حضار محترم نباشه. خیلی ممنون، مرسی. همین حالا فرصت اینو داریم که اگر یادتون رفته سلفوناتون رو تنظیم کنید. همونطور که میدانید AIAP یک سازمان غیر انتفاعی هست که هدفش خدمت به جامعه ایرانیان سندیاگو و آن دسته از افراد و گروه‌هایی که علاقمند به همکاری و همگامی با جامعه ایرانی سندیاگو را دارند. من از روی وبسایت میشن و objective AIAP را براتون گذاشتم. AIAP's objective is to be a positive element in the professional, social, economical well-being of its members and the community. Membership is open to all professionals interested in Persian and Iranian culture. AIAP's goal is to inform the community of important issues through several programs. سال 2023 یعنی امسال 30مین سالگرد تأسیس این سازمان هست که با همت همه اعضا و ساپورترهاش یکی از دستاوردهای با ارزش ایرانیان سندیاگو در این 30 سال بوده است. ولی باید به خاطر داشته باشیم که این دستاورد بدون پشتیبانی، دلگرمی، مشارکت، ساپورت اعضای فعالی مثل شما میسر نمی باشد. بنابراین جای اون داره که از همه اعضای AIAP و مخصوصاً سخنرانها و اسپانسرها و تمامی آنهایی که وقت، انرژی، تخصص و حتی روح و روانشون رو بدون دریغ در بهتر کردن متداوم این سازمان گذاشتن سپاسگزاری کنیم. لطفاً یک دست به موقع بود، تانکیو. لطفاً یه دست مرتب برای خودتون و اونهایی که اینجا نیستن ولی خدمات شایانشون با ما هست بزنید. You really deserve it. بزرگترین خدمت به این سازمان این هست که شما فعالانه در برنامه‌های متنوع این سازمان اعم از والنتیرینگ، سخنران، اسپانسر، منتقد، you name it و غیره شرکت کنید. لطفاً پیشنهادات خودتون رو از طریق شخصی، از طریق ایمیل، از طریق تلفن که با ما در میون بذاریم، برای اینکه این پیشنهادها باعث پیشرفت این سازمان میشه. در اینجا من میخواستم یک اشاره‌ای به نمونه‌های از برنامه‌های مرتب این سازمان در 30 سال گذشته بدم. یک گردهمایی ماهانه هست، ماهانه این سازمان که این گردهمایی، این میتینگ یکی از اونهاست. 12 تا از این میتینگ ها هر ماه برگزار میشه. گردهمایی ماهانه در سوشال نتورکینگ هست که پنجشنبه دوم هر ماه هست. پنجشنبه دوم هر ماه یه سوشال گدرینگ، سوشال نتورکینگ داریم. مال ماه قبل زی پیتزا بود، نه؟ درست. یه گردهمایی در هایک داریم، مانتلی هایک که یک شنبه سوم هر ماه هست. بعد ما برنامه‌های دیگه داریم از قبیل برنامه عید نوروز، چهارشنبه سوری، تیرگان، یه برنامه بسیار بسیار عالی داشتیم، مهرگان، پیکنیک سالانه و you name it. ما هنوز داره اسپانسرامون رو نشون میده. در این قسمت از برنامه یکی از هارد وارمینگ خبرهایی در مورد ساپورت و کمک مالی اعضای AIAP به کودکان خوی رو با شما در میان میذارم. شاید خیلی از شماها به یاد بیارین که ما AIAP در برنامه نوروزی 2023 خود که در تاریخ 19 مارچ بود تونستیم با همکاری یکی از اعضای توانای خودمون، خانم فری سامانی که گرداننده آکشن AIAP بودن، ما مبلغ قابل توجهی که توسط اعضای خیرخواه شرکت کننده در جشن نوروز اهدا شده بود فراهم کنیم برای بچه‌های خوی. بعد از به دست آوردن این منبع مالی، هیئت مدیره AIAP با دقت فراوان راه‌های مختلف رسیدن این منبع مالی رو به بچه‌های خوی بررسی کرد. میخواستیم که سعیمون بر این بود که بتونیم این پول همونطوری که با کمترین پروسس فی به دست بچه‌ها برسه. خیلی خوشحالم بگم که ما تونستیم این مبلغ رو توسط پرزیدنت AIAP آقای رضا طالقانی اینجا هستن، تازه از ایران برگشتن و الان یه مقدار جتلک هستن یا صداشون گرفته، ولی ایشون این مبلغ رو به دستاندرکارایی که مستقیما با بچه‌های خوی در تماس بودن رسوندن و خودشون در برنامه AIP آینده ما یک گزارش کامل، فکر میکنم با عکس و اسلاید در این مورد برای شما یک گزارش کامل خواهند داشت. واقعا جای تقدیر و خوشحالی است که یه همچین اتفاقی رو انجام شد برای بچه‌های خود. برای که سازمان‌های دیگه هستن که پروسسینگ فی دارن، کارمند دارن، اینو دارن، اونو دارن و بالاخره بعضی از این سازمان‌ها احتمال داره که درصد خیلی زیادی از این پول رو برای پرسنل خودشون یا برای هزینه‌های بالاخره حمل و نقل و یا اداره این امور صرف سازمان‌های خیریه منظورمه، ولی این پول تماماً به دست دستاندرکاران رسید. یه خبر بسیار مهم دیگه، شما حاضر هستین؟ خیلی با ارزش و ارزنده که مایه افتخار ما همه ما ایرانیان هست و مخصوصاً زنای ایران و زنای دنیا به نظر من مربوط به خانم جزمین مقبلیه. من نمیدونم که چند نفر از شما این خانم رو میشناسین.
C-SPAN, proudly true to our mission for 40 plus years.
Thank you so much, Dr. Biden. Wow, never as a kid standing around the half scene for the Soul Tab deal could I have imagined I would get to say these next words right here in the White
از
House.
اول لطفاً بذارید.
نوروز شما مبارک.
این خبر مخصوصا در این مقطع از تاریخ ایران که همه بی‌صبرانه منتظر گذار به آینده بهتر برای ایران هستیم قابل اهمیت می باشد.
Holiday full of symbolism.
از اول.
Thank you so much, Dr. Biden. Wow, never as a kid standing around the half scene for the Soul Tab deal could I have imagined I would get to say these next words right here in the White House. نوروز شما مبارک. Nowruz means new day. It is a celebration of the arrival of spring and all the hope that comes with it. It is a holiday full of symbolism, with each element of the half scene, or 7 S's, being representative. Growing up, my brother and I took part in preparing the half scene. We would help grow the sabzeh, a symbol of rebirth and growth, which often came in the form of a chia pet in our household. The goldfish, a symbol of progress, was often one that my brother or I had won at a school fair. The ayna, or mirror that we used, a symbol of self-reflection, was the same one that had been used at my parents' wedding, would eventually be used at my wedding, and now sits at my family's half-scene table. And this year, for the first time, my daughters were able to participate as well by decorating the eggs and growing the sabzeh at our half-scene. Last week, I went back to my elementary school and spent some time with the young students there. I remember when I was a student, my mom would come in each Nowruz and speak to my classmates about the holiday and our culture. It was at that same elementary school that my dream of someday becoming an astronaut began. While visiting, one of the students asked me, "Are you going to be the first woman to walk on the moon?" They were referring to NASA's Artemis program, which just last year completed its first test flight, Artemis 1, and will soon return astronauts to the moon, paving the way for future human missions to Mars. I answered, simply and honestly, "I don't know, but I could be." Isn't it amazing that I could say with complete honesty, as an Iranian American woman who wasn't even born here, that I have just as much chance as anyone else of being on the Artemis 3 mission. That I've even had the opportunity to become a NASA astronaut in the first place, and that later this year, my lifelong dream of launching to space will come true, as I will have the honor of commanding the Crew 7 mission to the International Space Station. Each Nowruz, we give thanks for our blessings and look ahead to the future. Even during difficult times, we hope for renewal and transformation. Reflecting on this past year, I stand here so proud of my Persian heritage, but also incredibly proud to be an American.
That's it. Thank you. مرسی. واقعا باعث افتخاره در این موقعی که در این زمانی که میلیون ها زن ایرانی دارن استراگل میکنن، چالش میکنن که روزشون رو شب
Thank you so much, Dr. Biden. Wow, never as a kid standing around the half scene with the Soul Tab field could I imagine I would get to say these next words right here in the White House. نوروز شما مبارک.
در این قسمت از برنامه به اخبار و انانسمنت توسط سازمان‌های دیگه اگر اینجا هستن، کانون فرهنگی ایرانیان، خانه ایران، نداریم انانسمنت دیگه توسط هر کسی؟ نه؟ خب آقای جیسون اینجا هستن؟ Very good. Okay. As some of you may know, for AAP's February meeting, we invited Congressman Scott Peters. He addressed in particular U.S. action and position in regards to what is happening in Iran. Members presented at the gathering were engaged in that presentation, and they asked so many questions from Congressman Scott Peters. Because of so much interest in the subject, Mr. Peters is introducing a new House resolution condemning the poisoning of schoolgirls and more. In this section of the program, I would like to ask Mr. Peters' assistant and district director, Mr. Jason Berkovich, to present and to explain some of those actions that are being taken. With further ado, I will ask Mr. Jason.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm a little flustered. It's tough to follow that video. It reminds me of my family story and a lot of our family stories, which we often forget, the challenges of coming here and then what they overcome. So good luck to her in her adventures to space. I want to hear all about it. But anyways, as was mentioned, my name is Jason Bergovich. I'm the district director for Congressman Scott Peters. Of course, in February, as was mentioned, we had a pretty robust, I think, discussion, but there were a lot of things that came up that we want to make sure that we were following up on and just getting better engaged in the conversation because of how much attention is being paid to Iran currently, given what's been going on there. So in discussion with the board for AIAP, I thought it would be a good time to come back and just talk about some of the things that have happened since our February visit. So just from the beginning to walk through, so first of all, just a few weeks following the congressman being here in February, I actually met with about a dozen of the organization's leaders, came down to the office, and we had a very, very robust conversation regarding some of the concerns about the legislation, about different legislation that's been introduced, concerns about what's going on in Iran, whether it's with the regime or the protests, or even the community here in the United States. So we really started the dialogue right after the congressman was here, and it's something that we look forward to continuing moving forward. Following up on that, there's been a couple of different proposals that have come out. There have been bills, resolutions, also a few letters that have come out, and we've had a really good dialogue, myself with leaders of AIP, regarding some of those, and I appreciate those of you that are here. I know a few of you are here that have been involved on some of those emails for providing your advice and your insights, because really on the advice of many of your leaders, a couple of things that the congressman has done over the last few months. So first of all, as you heard, he's one of the co-sponsors and helped introduce a resolution essentially condemning the Iranian regime for the lack of action that they've taken following the poisoning of a lot of the schoolgirls in Iran. That was a big one. And of course, I shared that resolution before the congressman decided. We had a very good discussion over email with many of your members about what your thoughts are, given how much you know about what's going on. And everybody seemed to support the idea of the congressman signing on to that resolution, which is one of the reasons that he did it. Another thing that we did which had fairly robust support, is we signed on to a letter to the European Union. The European Union held a vote, I believe last year or a year ago, in order to name the IRGC as a supporter of terrorism. But then, even though one body voted on it, the other bodies didn't take any action. So there's still a lot of business that's being conducted between Europe and entities that we're aware are under the control of the IRGC. And we really don't feel like that should be allowed. Here in the United States, we've already designated the IRGC, and we're very careful about businesses that are under their control. So the congressman signed on to a letter to the European Union trying to address that. Another one that came up recently, and I think this goes back to some of the concerns that arose in February, is there was a resolution recently that came out, for those that aren't aware, that was condemning and asking for a rescission of the Iranian representative to the United Nations being the chair of the essentially the UN Human Rights Council. So I know it's interesting how that happens, but a couple things to note, which I want to highlight, and I thank the community for providing their insight. So there was a letter from Congress to the UN ambassador to the United Nations, and it was talking about our opposition to that appointment, and it specifically highlighted a couple of different instances of Iranian human rights abuses. And it was interesting in that, with the history that we've seen, particularly since the 79 revolution, seems like there's a lot of instances of human rights abuses, unfortunately. And I know that we had a robust discussion about House Resolution 100. House Resolution 100 has about 3 pages worth of instances that we found very concerning. But this letter only named 2. And what was interesting is that upon discussing with leaders of the IAP, we found out that the 2 instances that were referenced in the letter were very specific to the MEK. And although there was some disagreement on whether the congressman should support or not, I definitely appreciate that insight. And we actually, as of now, he hasn't signed on because we're concerned about the fact that with all the human rights abuses that are alleged against the regime, we would only be highlighting in this letter 2 instances that were particularly focused on conflict between the MEK and the regime itself. There's ample debate, which I've had with members here and with others, about inclusive lists that highlight instances in which members of the MEK have been targeted, but also other members that aren't associated with the MEK, and there's some debate about the proper balance there. But we were a little bit concerned about a letter that only listed instances of the regime essentially committing abuses against the members of that organization. So all in all, what it comes down to is that dialogue, it really is useful for us, and it's very important for us to maintain that conversation. This issue isn't going to be going away. We know that there are other areas that are come up with regards to Iran. We know that they've advanced their nuclear weapons building, and they're expanding some of their facilities in order to build nuclear weapons and advance the nuclear research that they're doing. We're very concerned about that. There's been rumblings about what negotiations might happen or might not happen between the Biden administration and the regime. Right now, we just don't see anything happening there. I know there's other concerns that I've heard from people here and others in the community regarding not just the members of the regime, but some of their family members and assets that they own here in the United States, particularly houses that they might be purchasing here, or other assets that they might be holding here, and whether we're properly executing the sanctions that are being placed on the Iranian regime. So really the goal is we want to maintain that dialogue. There's a lot of coded language, unfortunately, that we see in some of these legislation. I'm not going to necessarily recognize the names on the bills, but you would recognize the names. I don't necessarily know, and the congressman isn't necessarily going to know the historic background behind some of the incidents that arise in Iran and how we might respond to that. But I just wanted to say that your leaders and yourselves as members, you really provide a crucial voice when it comes to our consideration of that. Because the congressman takes seriously his job as being a representative of the community. As members of the Iranian community, we really count on your voice and your perspective when it comes time to signing onto a bill, signing onto a resolution, making certain statements. So I really hope that we're going to be able to continue the dialogue that we've really improved on, I think, over the last 3 months. There's always area to improve, but I really hope that we're going to continue that dialogue, and I would welcome, of course, any insights both by the leaders of AIP as well as the members of AIP to any issues that are out there that you might have concerns about, comments about, so that we can continue to learn more about what's going on from you that are most impacted by it and often have family members that are still there and having to deal with some of the actions taken by the regime. And with that, I'm happy to take a pause and take a few questions.
Question?
Thank you, Jason, for making it here. And I'm very impressed to see that Congressmen, computers, and you are willing to listen to us. And as you alluded to it, we had several meetings after Congressman Peters came here. And it seems it's been effective because you have taken those into consideration. That is democracy at work. Thank you very much. In our meeting back in March in your office, you mentioned about a resolution or a bill or an amendment regarding some sort of facilitation of Iranians for visa. If you don't mind elaborating, thank you.
Sure, so great question. For those that didn't hear, I'll repeat it. So when we met previously, I mentioned a bill that we actually wrote to facilitate family members of Iranians in the United States coming to visit in the United States. So I'll get into a little bit of background and then I'll talk about the bill. What happens is that we know, because the Department of State releases this information, we know that people from certain countries that are trying to visit the United States are disproportionately denied visas. Iran is one of those countries. Not only, and you can tell your friends this because a lot of people aren't aware of it, you can't even interview in Iran, which of course you guys all know. Anybody that's trying to come to the United States and get a visa in the United States from Iran has to travel to certain very specific locations. I know that Turkey's an option, I think UAE's an option, Armenia's an option. There might be one more, but you can't even interview in Iran. So your family members, your friends are going through this process. They're booking trips. It's not cheap. They're flying to a different country just to get an interview done. And yet they're still, unfortunately, being denied the opportunities to come here for whatever reason, whether it's to tourist, whether it's for a special occasion like a marriage, the birth of a child, somebody's graduating college. There's all kinds of reasons that we would want them to be able to come here. But we see that they're being denied. So what Congressman Peters did is he wrote a bill, and we introduced the bill last year. We're working on bringing it back this year. It's called the Temporary Family Visitation Act. So what the Temporary Family Visitation Act does is it creates a whole new visa category. It creates a whole new visa category which is specifically meant for people that are coming here for special occasions and promising to return back to their home country. Unfortunately, what happens with many Iranian applicants is, given what's going on in the regime, which we just discussed, the Department of State kind of operates under the presumption that everyone wants to come here to the United States permanently. And in order to get a temporary visa, you have to prove that you're not coming here permanently. So it's very difficult for somebody coming from Iran, particularly somebody that might not necessarily be a fan of the regime, to convince staff at the Department of State that they're really just coming here for that special occasion. So what we did is we introduced this new bill that creates a category where people can really just come here for the special occasion. And the way that we balance that bill out, and we think that it's going to be successful, does have bipartisan support, is that people that come here using this new visa category actually won't qualify to become permanent residents in the United States. So normally people will come here sometimes under a temporary visa, and then they stay here and they apply under different mechanisms to gain permanent resident status. Under our new bill, we're saying if you're really just trying to come here for a special occasion, that's great. You come here using this new visa, and then you go back to your home country. And the catch to it, which is why we're able to get bipartisan support, is those coming that use that new visa category are ineligible to essentially get a green card. So that you would not be able to remain here and eventually get a green card. As I mentioned, the bill was introduced last year. It had bipartisan support. We are working to reintroduce it again this year. But one thing that was really exciting that came out this year is that some of you might have heard there was just recently a new immigration package that was introduced. It's called the Dignity Act. It was introduced by a Democratic Congresswoman from Texas, Congresswoman Escobar, and a Republican Congresswoman from South Florida, Miami area. So both with heavy immigrant communities. And in this package, one of the things that they included was our bill, the Temporary Family Visitation Act. So it's nice to see that not just us, but we're getting other members of Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, to start thinking about new ideas and new ways that we might fix our immigration system. We don't believe that there's any single bill that's going to fix what's going on with our immigration system, but there are a lot of different pieces that we might be able to get across the finish line that would really improve people's lives, such as the Temporary Family Visitation Act, so that your family members, your friends would be able to come here more easily to attend special events and to come visit you. Yes, sir.
Do applicants have to go through the same process in different countries, or is going to be offices in different cities or New York?
So the legislation does still require you to visit another country. Unfortunately, because of the relationship between Iran and the United States, we do not have facilities in Iran right now where an officer is able to conduct the interview. So it could be something that we look at. I know, for example, in Cuba, we had representatives, I forget which country, but we had representatives from different countries that were conducting some of the interviews for categories, so that might be something that we can take a look at with regards to Iran. But under the current setup, we simply do not have anybody designated in Iran, whether from the United States or a third country, that's allowed to conduct those interviews where the decision is made about approval or denial.
Any other question? Question?
Yes, sir.
Let's say if someone obtains that visa and comes to the United States, and then they go back, would they still be eligible to apply for permanent residency under a separate process, or would they be totally banned to apply?
Great question. The ban only applies while they're in the United States. So you can't come here using the Temporary Family Visitation Act and then stay here and apply to get a green card, or apply to, say, become a student, or claim there's certain restrictions on asylum. But the essence of it is, once you go back to your home country, you're fully eligible for everything once again. You just can't come here using that special visa, which explicitly says you're coming here for a special occasion, you're coming here to visit people, you're coming here for a one-time vacation, and then stay here and try to switch to what program you're here under. You come, graduation happens, wedding happens, you go back to Iran, you're fully eligible, just like under any other circumstance, for whatever category you might use. And I'm glad you asked that question, because I know many of you have probably had petitions pending for quite a while for some of your family members, whether it's a parent, a child, a sibling trying to come here. The Temporary Family Visitation Act has no impact whatsoever on that petition. The petition can remain pending while they're waiting for the visas to become available, while they're waiting for the proper interviews. They can come here and visit while waiting for that process to play out, and then go back to Iran as the process plays out. So very good question. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Jason. My question is this temporary visa law or bill that is being circulated in the Congress, in the House. What is the chance of it to get a full vote and become a law?
Well, that's a good question. So it is difficult to get votes. It is difficult to get votes on one-off bills such as that. Unfortunately, nowadays in Congress, we generally only pass large packages. In fact, about an hour ago, we just passed a very significant package to keep the government open, for those that haven't heard. So, yes, I think that deserves an applause. We're not shutting down. In fact, it was pretty notable as well. Last I heard the count, it was somewhere around 320 out of the 430 members voted in favor of it. About 160 Democrats, about 150 Republicans. So that's pretty bipartisan. But again, it's a big package. Sadly, more often than not, only the big packages are passing. What happens, though, is we keep a very close eye on the opportunity to attach these types of bills to certain packages. So, for example, the military funding has passed every year for like 40 years. It's called the National Defense Authorization Act. There's always conversations about little things that might be added to the military funding package, or the appropriations to keep the government open. So we have to pass a budget first, then we actually so the budget authorizes us to sign the check, but we still have to sign the check. There's a lot of little things that can sometimes get added to what's called the appropriations bill, which is actually the signature on the check. So we'll continue to look for opportunities to get these ideas across the line, again, because we know that we can't just try to hit a home run. The little hits make a very big difference in people's lives, and we're always going to look for opportunities in order to get those little hits because we know that make a big difference for you.
Thank you very much, Jason. Give him a round of applause.
In closing, I would just say thanks again for having me back. And please, I've got plenty of business cards. Let me know. Please reach out to our office. Please let us know what you think. We really do value your input. We really do value that dialogue, and I look forward to continuing that dialogue and getting your input as more topics come up and more ideas come up that's impacting the Iranian community, both here in the United States as well as abroad. So thank you very much.
Break time, we have 15 minutes. Break. باعث افتخار منی که این پرزنتر سخنران امشب رو کینوت اسپیکرمون در واقع معرفی بکنم. آقای دکتر بیژن زایر. مثل اینکه شما احتیاج به معرفی ندارین آقای دکتر. خب اینم که اینجا نوشته، ولی من یه تیکه باز میگم. internationally known professor, businessman, executive coach, consultant and author who specializes in implementation of high performance management, organizational, individual excellence and effective executive leadership. در ضمن شما هم رشته و من هستیم. Distinguished Professor of Management and Leadership at USD Keller Graduate School of Management and Leadership, Adjunct Professor of Management and Leadership at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University at DeVry University Keller Graduate School of Management, previously Chairman of the Landeck International University, Switzerland, and adjunct faculty at Chapman University. Ishun, author of 3 books, 42 research articles, amazing, contributing editor to numerous professional journals and magazines. Latest book published, Lead with Integrity, 7 Steps to Self-Respect and Happiness. Financial manager responsible for administration of major revenue and tax programs, enhanced revenue, recommended changes to current laws and regulation for the city of San Diego. Consultant relationship include, among others, Royal Dutch Shell Corporation, Home Federal Savings, Heineken Beer, really, Anheuser-Busch Beer. Kelco, a division of Mark and Company, Fokker Aircraft, IBM Solar Turbine, Bank of America, Ralston, IVAC, division of Eli Lilly, Dora Pharmaceuticals, General Dynamics, Megatech, division of United Telecom, Great American Savings, and Armor Light. He's an entrepreneur in laboratory instrument manufacturing, real estate development, and private school business. Member of several board of directors, including major multinational firms. International activities include lecturing in Holland, England, Denmark, Brazil, France, Switzerland, Spain, Iran, and Russia, Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. With further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Zaire to the podium. Give him a round of applause.
خانم دکتر زاکری سپاس ممنونم. Good evening everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening to take this journey together about economic outlook. It is important for us to know how our economy works and why it works the way it does. Those of you who may think that how this is relevant to Iranian community, I assure you that we live in this community, we live in this country, and when there's a recession, we are going to be affected. When we go to the gas pump, we are going to be affected. When your grocery price goes up, we are going to be affected. So indeed, it will impact our lives. It is my pleasure and honor to thank Dr. Zakari, who really pays attention to detail. She wanted to make sure everything was prepared and done so that this presentation will be successful. And I want to express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Zakari. Thank you very much. And also thank AIAP to invite me to make this presentation this evening. During the last 2 years, we have been through a lot. Interest rates have gone up. Price of gas has gone through the roof. And recession, inflation has gone crazy. So we are going to examine and look at the reasons for this. One thing is important to understand, that our economic system is probably one of the best economic systems in the world, bar none. Many great opportunities are ahead of us. I will assure you this. So what happens in our economic system, it is to see that how this economic system actually works. This cycle that you see, oops, pushed the wrong button. So anyway, while we are resetting this, thank you. Okay, so you see peaks and valleys. Okay, so peaks and valleys. This is the peak of this cycle, because U.S. economy is a cyclical economy. So when you look at this, this is the peak of this cycle, and then down here is the lowest part of the cycle, which is the recession. So what this cycle means, that when we are declining in our economy, then we see economy going down. And then it hits recession. Recession is like a sieve, if you will, that it sifts through all the inefficient businesses. So those businesses, thank you, and those businesses that they are not efficient, so they basically get eliminated. Just like football teams. When we start with 100 teams, suddenly we have only 2 teams to go to the Super Bowl. So in recession, the same thing happens. So when many of those businesses are eliminated, then we begin the recovery. Moving up, again we reach this peak. peak performance. And that peak performance basically is the opportunity to see how this economy actually works in efficient fashion. Now, this is a very important point to remember. Between this peak and that peak is about 8 to 10 years. So some business owners, sometimes they act like surprise. Why is this happening in this country? Government should do something. But the truth is, government cannot do anything. This has nothing to do with government. It has a lot to do with American businesses. So corporate America has a lot to do when we see many businesses are born on the hour, every hour. We have a lot of businesses that they may or may not be efficient. So as a result, when they are not efficient, then they get eliminated when there is a recession. Okay? Once that happens, then we know that this economy is working. Now, this is the best economy, as I mentioned earlier, as long as government doesn't mess with it. What I mean by that? Government right now is pumping millions of dollars into the economy. It is almost like those of you doctors among us, somebody's dying and you keep giving them mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to keep him alive. So it doesn't work in the long term. Therefore, when they keep pumping the money into the economy, we are creating greater and higher debts, which, by the way, as the district officer of the congressman mentioned, today it was approved that finally they will raise the debt ceiling because we have to pay those bills. That's a different topic. We will talk about that a little bit later. But it is important to understand how this economy works. Now, to validate all the indicators, economic indicators that I look at every year, I use the most important indicators that's available through journals, Department of Labor, statistics, so that we can validate an accuracy of the information that we forecast, so that we can determine what will happen. When we looked at the economy for 2023, back in December, well, we predicted that around this time, economy is going to move into the recession. There was a 40% possibilities. And now we are experiencing very close to that. So therefore, when I looked at these indicators, I also looked at the gross domestic product, GDP, to see where the unemployment rate is. Unemployment numbers for the last 4 years have been basically the same. We have about 1,650,000 jobs. And there has been zero growth in San Diego County for the last 4 years. That's not to say that companies have not hired new people, but there are a lot of people who have left the country, the county. So therefore, the impact was basically zero. When we look at the California, because this forecast also looks at the California. California, or the region, grew about 2%, creating over 322,000 jobs in California. But San Diego did not. Now, there's one other part that is important for us to look at, is where we stand in terms of advanced industries. That means high-tech, biotech businesses, that where they are in terms of the growth and where we are. So when we look at the San Diego, we see 3.5% as compared to other advanced industry jobs. Okay? And growth in advanced industries also is about 8.5. We've done better than Orange County. That's a good point. And then, of course, when we look at housing in San Diego County, by 2021, we grew 39,000 homes in San Diego County. And that meant that a lot of people were buying homes. But by the end of 2022, we began to lose all those homes that we had sold during that time, about 28%. And what that really means, that means that basically the rising interest rates started making people to think about, do I want to sell my home? If I sell my home, then I'm going to have to go and buy another home with a higher interest rate of 6%. So therefore, the inventory in real estate is still pretty low in this county. And of course, those people who want to buy homes, they're not available. Home builders, on the other hand, when we look at the this is an important point that I should mention. The mortgage rate, principal and interest for monthly payments for median homes was $2,600 for median home. When real estate took off in San Diego County, it went to $5,200. It doubled. So how many people could afford? Not too many people. And then, of course, when the interest rates start climbing, then it caused, again, another problem. So you see the growth that we experienced. Now, home price appreciation was also really severe because home prices start skyrocketing and prices start going up, and we experienced in 2022 1.29 thousand homes that they were sold during that time. And then we saw in first half of the 2023, it started losing about 7.3%. So you may ask yourself, is this a buyer's market or is it a seller's market? I will say it's still a seller's market because they are not building too many homes. At the same time, when we evaluate how many permits are being pulled by County of San Diego, we are seeing that not too many builders are building. Why? Because cost is very high for them to build homes. They have to see if it will pencil out. If they build these homes, will they be able to make a decent profit? So because of that, and we are seeing that actually 7.3% diminished. Now, again, these are the permits that there was 21% reduction in pulling permits. So this also caused difficulty for San Diego economy. Now, what will happen from here on? We said that this is a cyclical economy, and that's absolutely true, that this cycle will bounce back. The best part of this economic system we have in this great country is self-healing economy. That economy rebuilds itself. So therefore, there is no need to begin to pump money into the economy. But there's one other thing, and we have a illustrious CPA in the back, and he knows that there is a generational wealth that is built into any growth. When we are seeing monies that people were coming to San Diego and buying these homes frequently for cash, where this money was coming from? That money was from that generational wealth that many, many people had accumulated over time. So there's nothing you can do about that capability. But will the prices will go down? There's only two possibilities. One possibility is to build more homes, to again begin to pull more permits from the county to build, or to have more people to come to San Diego. Now, one thing is important for you to also remember, that people vote with their feet when they leave California, because it is no longer affordable. Companies who want to come to San Diego, they think, is San Diego County affordable for our employees to buy a home? If it is not, then we are going to see adverse effect of this. So therefore, our economic system, even after it begins to recover, by the way, this economy already is in recession in certain sectors. And other sectors are being affected as well, but not as much, because this recession is unlike 2008 recession, which was very severe. This is going to be mild recession. But nevertheless, it is going to have impact on all of us who live in San Diego County, one way or the other. So it is better for us to know that and be prepared. Now, when we look at housing under the construction, you see what happened. Okay, so here we are looking at 23, 24. And at that point, we see about pretty close to 800,000 homes being built if the economy improves to that point. And it will. And we are looking at perhaps the 2 units or 1 unit multifamilies or single family homes. Okay? Now, when we look at new housing in this great country, we will see a growth, but at the same time, growth is not going to be at really a higher level, because if you look at the peak performance of 2006, 2007, we are still in 2020, we are down here. Of course, we didn't extend this graph to 2023 because there's still this information from the Department of Labor Statistics is not available so that we can correctly measure that. Now, these are new residential construction in 2023. Those are the building permits that we see. Okay, building permits 1,416,000. Housing starts this was about April of 2023 because it takes about 6 months to a year to build homes. So housing completions, we are hoping that this is what will happen. So now that we are front of you at your presence, we are looking at the recession is much more likely that is happening as we had predicted back in December. And then of course, graphically, we are able to see the number of permits are beginning to be pulled and how many is going to be possibly completed. Okay? So these are the annual residential construction that starts in California. So even though we are not still up here to that level, but we are beginning to move up since 2008. And of course, during Corona, COVID-19, certain things happened which affected our economy severely. Not only in San Diego County, but most part of the United States. And that was shortage of labor. So there was a huge shortage of labor. Companies hired people, and in many cases, they had to pay higher wages to hire these new employees. Suddenly, they realized, oh my God, recession is coming, inflation is high, what are we going to do with all these employees? So what we are seeing now, and we are experiencing, many of those companies are beginning to lay off. And that affects employment severely. So those people who are looking for jobs in San Diego, they're experiencing difficulty because again, there's not much growth in that area. But I'm optimistic that within next 6 months, we will be able to see great improvements. Now, before I conclude my remarks, it is important to let you know that, as I promised earlier, that great days are ahead of us, and that is the promise of this great economy. Because we are so fortunate to live in an economy that will improve every 8 to 10 years. We will experience these cyclical peaks and valleys, but eventually we will be able to reach a point that it will again go back to where we can enjoy life. But again, I will say that those of us who have chosen to live in sunny San Diego, this is the picture that we have shared with you today. Any questions?
Question for Dr. Zaire.
Thank you for a very nice, informative talk. My question to you is, what is your metric for recession, and what is the threshold of that metric where you can declare a recession or not?
Thank you. Yes, we use blue chip measures that is in journals that comes out to give us economic indicators where we are, as well as Department of Labor Statistics provides information that we use those information to make our projections and our forecast. So again, my forecast from the December was there was a 40% possibility of recession, and yes, it actually happened. Now we are giving you the report of mid-year forecast, which it is consistent with what we predicted in December. Now, if it changes between now and the next 6 months to be better, then it will be very great news for those of us who hope to see this economy recovers fast. Yes. Mr. Daraghi.
Yeah, thank you very much. You've been talking about housing a lot, but San Diego has a bigger economy. It has a lot of businesses, biotech, high-tech, defense, tourism. Can you talk a little bit more broadly in terms of what would impact San Diego economy in terms of recession and just apart from the housing?
Yes, of course. Thank you. San Diego County has mostly at the advanced technology and advanced industries, high-tech and biotech industries, which are growing rapidly. Other businesses, retail businesses, wholesale businesses, are basically surviving in San Diego economy. After the corona, after COVID-19, many of these businesses almost disappeared. And many businesses in many of the communities that you live, they disappeared because they just couldn't get enough customers to sustain their operations. However, again, San Diego is a beautiful city. A lot of people like to come to San Diego, and there is a hope that many of these businesses gradually will come back. But that 2 years during the COVID-19, San Diego County suffered quite a bit, lost a lot of those businesses. And some of those businesses are beginning to recover now, but still they're not there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zahir. I enjoyed very much your talk. Clear, very informative. However, something bothers me. You mentioned a number of times about this great country. I wonder if you have been in downtown San Diego and you see a large number of homeless people. Beside those homeless people, if you go further into the East San Diego, there are some housing which is much worse than those homeless. I know about this country and I know about the economic of this country, and I know there are more billionaire and more trillionaire in this country than any other part of the world. However, the difference in this country is so far, so bad, that I don't believe that it could maintain and survive. Thank you.
Thank you for your good comments. I wish the mayor of San Diego was here to hear those comments, and I'm sure he hears quite a bit of these comments from his constituents in San Diego County. One thing is for sure, that when the wealth in the society is not shared equally, then this will cause this kind of difficulties in what we see, which they are really the examples of problems that we see in our society in downtown San Diego. This kind of problem is not a unique problem to San Diego, other than we have a nicer climate, people can live in their tents. But in general, the taxes that pays to maintain these kind of housing, unfortunately, is not there. You will not find, representative of the congressman is here, you will not find any congressman or senator who will sponsor a tax hike bill. Do you know why? Because they won't get elected next year or next time that they're running for that. So then if there's no taxes, then how are we going to pay for this? I was financial manager for the city of San Diego for many years. And in San Diego, we couldn't increase taxes. Property tax is one of the important sources of revenue for the government, local governments. And Prop 13 basically limits that to 1.2%. That's it. So where the money is going to come, other than philanthropic communities who are willing to support the community and help. But I have a good news for you, because I attended a meeting just last week with mayor's office that they are beginning to design housing in San Diego, and they've already identified several locations that they will be building homes for veterans. Now you are going to say, well, why veterans? Well, veterans have served this great country, and they deserve to have shelter. So they're going to begin with that, and there's of course a lot of political push for veterans, and they're going to start with that, so they will provide housing for them. And these housings are going to be, I heard the number which was incredible, that they're going to build a square foot $200, which is so low. But these are small homes that they're going to build for these people so that they can be sheltered rather than being in. Now, it is true that other economies, which we call them planned economy, like Europe, people pay a lot of taxes. In Germany, I have a friend who was a doctor, and one day I went to his clinic and I saw people lined up round and around. And I went in, I said, of course, capitalistic thinking here, right? So I said, why don't you hire more people, more doctors, so that you will be able to make a lot of money? He looked at me, he said, what for? I'm working for government. He said, I'm paying 78% taxes. So again, it goes back to the inequality of taxpayers. So as part of my research for this economy, I learned about a concept that talks about recession. Recession, not a recession, recession. What that means, that this recession is hitting the rich people in their pocketbook. And as a result, obviously, because most commonly, the people in lower level of echelon of earnings, they are impacted by recession and inflation. But now we are experiencing this. And one of the reasons there is the pressure on Jerome Powell, our Fed chairman, to control this inflation is exactly that, because they don't want people to have to pay for this. So I hope that was a long answer for your question.
Dr. Zahra, to just piggyback on your question, great question. And as you know, less than 1% of U.S. population, less than 1%, this is a correct statistic, less than 1% of U.S. population own more than 99% of U.S. wealth. If you don't believe that, Google it. So, the concept of great America or great country or great economy depends on what angle or how you are looking at. You know, you had one example of San Diego, right? Homelessness. It is not unique to San Diego. Homelessness is everywhere in America. If you go to Los Angeles, if you go to Bay Area, if you go to East Coast, if you go to Midwest, you see it in a different way. So it is not something that, yes, I know that in Germany or in European countries, people pay high taxes. But what about the wealth of people, population in that country? Are they? Is it a huge gap that we have, Dr. Zahra, in this country?
No.
So
Well, the gap-
it's just something to think. I mean,
Yes, very good point. Thank you very much for that analogy. One thing that's important for us to know, that the economy of this country is built on market economy or free enterprise system, which is completely different than any other part of the world. So this is why corporate America, when they get efficient, then country is going to become more prosperous. Now, if I tell you that corporate efficiency today in corporate America is 33%, that means it takes 3 people to do 1 person's work. So if you are a CEO of a company and you expect to show profit, how are you going to do that? So that is where the problem is. And then of course, that expands to a larger scale of why United States start outsourcing. Almost 90 to 100% outsourced into other parts of the world because the labor cost is so expensive in America. And what happened during the last year, when we had problem getting products from other parts of the world to our economy, many car builders were not able to build cars. And as a result, price of automobiles skyrocketed. So one may question that, well, what is causing this? Well, supply chain. Supply chain was not working because we had outsourced too much. From my venture point, based on years of research, companies should not outsource more than 50%. So they have at least opportunity to build these units in the country But when they outsource, I will get that in a minute. When we outsourced 100%, we are hostage to these countries that they are providing this. And the other one, of course, was the transportation problem. We couldn't bring enough products to build units. One, two, and
yes.
There are
Who was number
questions.
one?
three. Right here.
Okay. I just, before
Thank
you
you
just
for your
ask your
patience.
question, I wanted to just have a one comment, and that is the introduction of a phenomenal, giant concept, and that is artificial intelligence that will have a huge effect in economy. I wanted you to just basically address that. But
Yes,
I
of
will
course.
do that.
Thank you, Dr. Zari. Quick question. So, $2.9 trillion of commercial estate are going to be due for renegotiation within 24 months. When the lending rate is 350 to 450 higher than what it used to be.
Right.
So out of the $20 trillion, 80% of that is held by the small banks, which naturally, you say the businesses are back, you see quite a few shopping centers that they're empty, and then probably potentially more are going to be empty, right? Looking back at last 2 years, banks were held back for foreclosing. So, for COVID and what have you, they weren't allowed to foreclose. So, in your study, is that something that you took into consideration as far as the potential crash of all those small banks as they're holding about 80% of?
Yes.
of
In this, thank you. Excellent question. In this economy, we call that hard landing. Hard landing means that when suddenly certain debt comes due, and those people who are supposed to be paying those debts, they are unable to meet those obligations, and as a result, there are devastating effects. So, Jerome Powell, our Federal Reserve Chair, when we start having these inflations, he said these are transitory. Transitory. That means it is temporary measures that is going to pass. But it didn't. So now, to be able to sustain that statement, Department of Treasury keeps borrowing money to keep this economy alive. Now, when it comes to the debt ratio of government, $32 trillion we owe money. If it is a private investment, private debt, then they will call the note, and those people have to somehow satisfy it, or it goes to the bankruptcy stage. So government needs to begin to look at some kind of fiscal responsibilities of what I call austerity measures. That means why government should be costing so much money in this country. We are not in a war, thank God. So as a result, it is causing us to increase the debt ceiling, which just passed a few hours ago in this country. So what that means, I think these austerity measures are very important for government to take. But will they do that? And the other problem that you remember I earlier mentioned that government has tendency of messing with the economy. That means bailouts. You remember when government started bailing out many companies? And did they ever pay that back? I don't know. I think these are issues that it's much bigger scale that government has to face with and deal with it. And also help the small businesses to become more efficient in the way they do business. And what can they do with those shopping centers? Well, can they convert them to residential homes that there's a desperate need in San Diego? It's one option. Thank you.
So I'm glad I stayed because that was fascinating. So thanks for the information. Two quick comments from a government perspective, and then I do have one question. One, we brought up the automobiles. The main reason that we had an automobile shortage for awareness is the lack of chip manufacturing in the United States. So while you recognize Qualcomm and Intel and companies like that that have the designs and the technology for the chips, it's something like 90% of chips are built in East Asia. So that is one of the reasons when you hear about the CHIPS Act that was passed a year or two ago, the CHIPS Act was specifically meant to incentivize onshoring of production of chips here in the United States so that we don't run into that situation. That's one comment just for aware. So the CHIPS Act, when you hear that, that's specifically an incentive for companies to build the chips here rather than overseas to try to not run into that. The other one, just for awareness, it was mentioned, the national debt right now is about $32 billion. 20% of that, I'll repeat, 20% of that was accumulated in the 4 years that President Trump was in office. 20% of the entire national debt was accumulated between 2017 and 2020 when Trump was in office. So keep that in mind when people are talking about concerns about the debt. The question with regards to housing, which is an interesting balancing act in a capitalistic society, about 10% of the housing stock starting in 2020 has been bought up by private investors rather than families and individuals.
Yes.
I was wondering if you had any comments or thoughts on the impact that that's having overall with so many investors purchasing homes and converting them into rentals versus homes being available for families and individuals to move into.
Yes. The interesting aspect of this is really goes back to the affordable homes, okay? Because even though the housing will eventually catch up when there is a demand, supply has to come. However, affordable housing is something that no one wants to have these homes built in their backyard. So consequently, city and county is really stuck. I mean, this meeting I attended last week with mayor's office and representatives from the county basically was talking about how are we going to do this? How can we handle these mini homes to accommodate these people so that we will clean up these cities? And of course, a couple days ago, I don't know how this happened, but mayor's office or mayor mentioned that those people who are illegally staying on the sidewalks, they cannot do that. I mean, give me a break. Those people are not there by choice. They are homeless. Either they're going to sleep in their car or they're sleep in a tent on the sidewalk. So community has to sustain that. Community has to do something about that. And if we don't have the money, then we need to get help from the state of California or the federal government to be able to do better.
Any other comments? Sorry,
First of all, I want to thank you very much for the fantastic presentation. That was really, really one of the best presentations I have been to. Thank you. Next, I want to have a comment regarding this great country. Indeed, it is a great country. That's why we are all here. So we have to be fair with that. And next, I have a couple of questions. If the prices of everything that has gone up, is it going to come down or not? That's one question, like groceries included. Number two, is this a good time to invest on stocks or real estate? Maybe not here in San Diego County, but in the Midwest or in other parts of the country. And then number three is just a comment. Just last week, I was meeting, my husband and I were meeting with a wonderful friend that's a lawyer also. And he was telling us that in his 41 years of being a lawyer, that he has seen this great country going down. He said something that I was really amazed. He said it used to be that the government, the politicians were volunteers, like people in the Congress or state representatives there. They didn't have any salary at one point. He said back 41 years ago. But now they are making the most salary than anybody else. So in order, if we want to make, and this is just a comment in my simple mind, that if we want to make the economy and the whole country better, we really have to, like you said, community has to serve. We have to all come together. We can't just sit behind and look at it and say, well, eventually it's going to get better. I mean, we need a lot of volunteers, especially our politicians that are having huge salaries. Maybe we need to volunteer rather than like the wonderful association that we have here. All the board members volunteer, right? Their services, they don't get any pay. So
great questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent questions. I will address those one at a time. And first of all, in terms of grocery bill, again, I will go back to woman power. Still to this date, most grocery is purchased by lady of the house. I remember a few years ago, Meat Cutters Association and some butcher organizations decide that they're going to triple the price of the meat. Do you know what? Ladies boycotted. They said, we are not going to buy meat. And guess what? Within 10 days, all these people realizing that, oh my God, nobody's buying meat, they had to reduce the price to lower than what it originally it was. So again, you are absolutely correct. It takes the community to do something to fix that problem. Now, regarding housing, I still believe that San Diego County is the best place to make those investment dollars. Why? Because in San Diego County, when you buy a home, either for yourself or for investment, it is not only a home, it's an investment. During the last 3 years, real estate went up on an average of 18 to 20%. So where can you put your money safely to experience that kind of increase? Okay, so it is the safest environment. Now, as to the community's responsibility, you are absolutely correct. Community should assume responsibility. how can we do this better? I know people here that they offer finance classes for students, for people who don't have money, to teach them how to become better money managers. Pro bono. And those are the type of things that need to happen in our society in order to prevent devastating problems that we could potentially face in our world.
Dr. Zahir, one last question we have there. And
Actually, this is a very difficult request, Dr. Zahir. Since you said we live in sunny Southern California, what's your forecast as when we're going to have the sun back? We have some warmer weather. We pay for it dearly, might as well we gotta get it. So what's your forecast there?
I feel like it is rushed. This San Diego, not rushed.
Yes, of course. You know, my case is as good as yours as to how these weather forecasters are going to determine. All of us who even forecast the economy, we are looking at the best possible economic indicators to determine what in 6 months or a year may happen in our world. So those forecasters, they look and do their best to estimate what may happen. Not always successfully it happens. But I invite you to come to my cabin in Idlewild. You will see a lot of sunshine there.
thank you very much, Dr. Zahir, for such a wonderful presentation, and thank you for your engagement and involvement in discussion. That made it much, much more interesting. And thank you for coming. And if you
And I just want to thank
final comment.
AIP and Dr. Zakiri and you to make this possible, because we need to know about these things that happens in our economy. So we are in this thing all together. Thank you so much for giving me your opportunity and time to be front of.
Great.